Imagine the sensory overload of Houston summer back in the 1960s. I
Yeah.
mean, you were spending your days inside a sweltering, unair-conditioned auto body shop.
Oh, brutal.
Right. You were completely covered in grease, mixing these harsh chemical paints and spending 10 hours a day pounding out dents from heavy steel bumpers.
Yeah, the physical toll of that is just backbreaking.
Exactly. And your hands are permanently stained with motor oil and primer. But then the sun goes down over Texas.
And everything shifts.
It really does. You scrub up as best as you can, you grab a guitar, and step onto a neon-lit stage to become a local club sensation by night. It sounds almost too cinematic to be real, you know?
It really does sound like a movie script.
Yeah. But now, take that same humble mechanic and fast-forward the tape. Watch him chart 48 singles, land 5 #1 hits, and eventually get invited to join the absolute pinnacle of country music institutions.
The Grand Ole Opry.
The Grand Ole Opry.
It's just a striking juxtaposition, isn't it?
Totally.
You have the gritty, physical reality of manual labor during the daylight hours, contrasting so sharply with the spotlight and, the velvet suits of the stage at night, and the person bridging that massive divide is Gary Gene Watson.
Today, our mission in this deep dive is to really explore the architecture of Gene Watson's incredible, steady rise.
Mm.
We are pulling from a stack of biographical sources to trace his journey from regional Texas obscurity to unquestioned country music legend.
Mm.
And the reason we are doing this is because his story is, well, it's a masterclass in persistence, authentic artistry, and a specific kind of slow burn success that we just rarely see in the music industry anymore.
Right, and it's an important narrative to unpack if you want to understand how legacy is actually built.
Yeah.
I mean, we live in an era obsessed with virality, right? Overnight breakthroughs.
Oh, one viral video and you're famous.
Exactly. But this story is the exact opposite. It's an exploration of the somewhat lost art of the working class musician. We are looking at an artist who spent over a decade paying his dues in the trenches before he ever saw a flash of the national spotlight.
A whole decade.
Over a decade. It is a powerful reminder that sometimes the strongest foundation for a career is poured quietly, in the background, while the rest of the world is desperately searching for a shortcut.
Okay, let's unpack this foundation.
Yeah.
Because his roots are deeply tied to the geography of Texas.
Very much so.
Gary Gene Watson was born on October 11th, 1943, in Palestine, Texas.
Right.
And he spent his early years raised in Paris, Texas. But the real crucible for his early career was his relocation to Houston in 1963.
Yeah, Houston was wild back then.
Right. Houston in the early 60s was this booming industrial city. It had a massive, hardworking population looking to blow off steam in the local clubs at night.
And that environment perfectly shaped the intense, grueling schedule that defined Watson's life for that entire decade. What's crucial to understand here is that he actually had his very first radio single track called If It Was That Easy debut back in 1962.
Wow.
Right before he even moved to Houston. But getting a song played on a local radio station didn't mean you could quit your day job.
Not at all.
He spent the entire decade of the 60s and half of the 70s working at that Houston auto body shop by day and performing in the clubs at night.
So he was essentially the Clark Kent of country music.
Ah, that's actually a great way to put it.
Yeah, mild-mannered mechanic by day, captivating crooner by night. He was managing this exhausting double life. He was recording for small regional record labels during this time, and he actually managed to secure a solid regional hit with a song called Bad Water.
Mm-hmm.
But if we look at the music industry landscape of the 1960s and early 70s, I have to wonder about the mechanics of that regional scene.
Oh, it's a totally different beast.
Right, because today, if a song catches fire on a local level, it hits a streaming algorithm, and suddenly someone in Tokyo is listening to it on their commute. How structurally difficult was it to break out of that Texas bubble back then?
It was nearly impossible.
Really?
Without major corporate backing, yeah.
Mhm.
Regional radio in the 1960s was like trying to start a fire in a vacuum. You could have the best spark in the world, which Watson certainly did with his voice, and with a regional hit like Bad Water. But without the oxygen of national distribution, that fire is never going to spread past the county line.
Wow.
The reality of the scene back then was that it operated as a series of walled gardens.
Because it was a purely physical medium.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't have a major label physically pressing thousands of heavy vinyl records.
Yeah, loading them onto fleets of trucks.
Right. Physically driving them to radio station programmers and record stores in Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles, you were geographically trapped.
That's crazy to think about now.
You could be the absolute biggest, most highly paid star in the Houston club circuit, and a country music fan in Ohio would literally have no way of discovering you existed.
Which, I think, casts his endurance in a completely different light. The patience required to keep going is just staggering.
It really is.
We were talking about a guy who maintained this mechanic by day, musician by night routine for over a dozen years. He didn't pack it in when a national tour didn't materialize after year 3 or year 7. He just kept fixing fenders and singing.
It reveals a deeply ingrained blue-collar psychology, you know?
Yeah?
He wasn't sitting around the body shop feeling bitter, waiting to be discovered so he could finally start his life.
Right, he was already living it.
Exactly. He was just a working man who happened to have 2 jobs, one of which required a guitar. That level of grounded humility really insulated him from the desperation that destroys a lot of aspiring artists.
But the dynamic does eventually shift.
It does.
It's 1975. Watson has been grinding in those clubs for about 13 years since his first radio single in '62. And suddenly, Capitol Records enters the picture.
The big leagues.
Yeah. They pick up his album, Love in the Hot Afternoon, and they release it nationally. The title track drops in June 1975, and it shoots all the way to number 3 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart.
And if we look at the stylistic choices of that breakthrough hit, it is fascinating.
How so?
Love in the Hot Afternoon is a mid-tempo ballad, and it's written in 3/4 time. It's a waltz.
Okay, but wait. I'm having a hard time buying this smooth overnight success angle in 1975, though.
Fair enough.
You don't just wash the grease off your hands, walk out of an auto body shop, sign a Capitol Records contract, and immediately hit Billboard's top 3
Correct.
without some serious industry friction.
Oh, for sure.
What is missing from this equation? Why did this specific song work in that specific year?
What's fascinating here is that to understand why it worked, you have to look at what country music sounded like in 1975.
Okay.
The genre was being pulled in 2 very different directions. On one side, you had the dominant Nashville sound, which was highly polished, pop crossover country drenched in string arrangements. Think John Denver and Olivia Newton-John winning country awards.
Oh, okay.
On the other side, you had the raw, rebellious outlaw movement gaining steam in Austin with Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings.
So the landscape is highly polarized. You've got pop country versus outlaw country.
Exactly. And right down the middle comes Gene Watson with a sultry traditional country waltz. It was counter-programming.
Oh, I see.
It stood out because it sounded completely unbothered by the trends around it. Capitol Records didn't pluck a novice out of a garage and spend years trying to manufacture a pop star. They found a seasoned, road-tested veteran who had spent thousands of hours perfecting a pure, unapologetic traditional sound in smoky Texas honky-tonks.
That is the crucial mechanism here. Preparation meeting opportunity.
Yes.
He already had the product perfected. Capitol simply provided the national distribution infrastructure that we talked about earlier. They were the oxygen for the fire he'd already built.
And once that fire got oxygen, the audience response was immediate. People who were hungry for authentic, traditional country music rallied around him instantly because the quality of his vocal delivery was undeniable.
Right.
He didn't need to learn how to work a microphone or handle a crowd. He had effectively completed a 13-year residency in the clubs of Houston.
And once that Capitol machinery was turned on, the hits came at a relentless pace. This ushers in what we can comfortably call his golden era, stretching through the late 1970s and early 1980s.
Yeah, he was everywhere.
He releases a massive string of Billboard Top 40 hits that permanently cement his signature traditionalist brand. Our sources highlight tracks like Where Love Begins, Paper Rosie, Should I Come Home or Should I Go Crazy, and Nothing Sure Looked Good on You.
The output during this period is incredibly consistent. It all builds up to a major commercial milestone in 1981 when he lands a massive #1 hit with the song 14 Karat Mind.
Right, but even before he hit the absolute top of the chart with 14 Karat Mind, there was a release in 1979 that I think fundamentally changed the trajectory of his career and his identity.
Oh, definitely.
The song was Farewell Party.
Yeah. Farewell Party goes beyond just being a successful single. When it was released in 1979, it became his definitive signature song. If you mention Gene Watson to a country music fan, the opening notes of Farewell Party are usually what starts playing in their head.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Anyone who follows traditional country music knows that legendary backing bands often have their own distinct names.
Right, like Buck Owens and the Buckaroos.
Exactly. Or Merle Haggard and the Strangers. But what strikes me as unique about Watson's situation is that Farewell Party was such a monumental, defining track for him that he literally named his longtime backing band after it.
He did.
They became the Farewell Party Band. What does that specific dynamic tell us about how he operated as an artist?
Well, it tells us that he operated as part of a collective rather than an isolated solo star. Giving the band an identity tied directly to his most famous song is brilliant branding, but it also establishes a deeply loyal economic and creative partnership.
Right.
This wasn't a rotating cast of anonymous studio musicians hired for a tour. The Farewell Party Band had its own autonomy and its own localized economy on the road.
And the sources back that up heavily. They were heavy hitters in their own right. Notable musicians like Tony Booth were members over the years.
Yep.
And they didn't just stand in the shadows playing his chords. Between 1982 and 1984, there were actually 2 studio albums released that were officially credited to both Gene Watson and the Farewell Party Band. They share the marquee.
Furthermore, the band backed Watson on his solo projects, and they were empowered to release a studio album entirely on their own.
Wow.
That level of integration is a survival mechanism in the music industry. If you want to survive decades in a business that notoriously chews artists up and spits them out, you need a rock-solid foundation. You need a traveling family.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That cohesive unit insulated Watson from the whims and changing tastes of label executives in Nashville.
That insulation and that loyalty to his roots really explain the next massive chapter of his story, which is his sheer, almost unbelievable longevity.
Yeah.
He never compromised that core traditionalist identity, and it allowed him to play the long game. Let's jump to 2012.
Okay.
We noted his first radio single was in 1962. So February 2012 marks exactly 50 years in the music business.
Which is wild. Reaching a half-century mark as an active recording artist is a statistical anomaly. It requires a level of vocal preservation and audience retention that very few people possess.
So to celebrate that 50-year milestone, he releases an album called Best of the Best, 25 Greatest Hits, and he releases it on his very own independent label, 14 Karat Music.
Which is obviously a clever nod to his 1981 #1 hit.
Naturally. But the sources detail something fascinating about this 2012 release. The collection of songs was entirely re-recorded. The explicit goal was to recreate the original hits as closely as possible in the studio.
Right.
Now, put your music industry analyst hat on for a second.
Okay, so
Why go through the immense financial and logistical effort of getting a band back into a studio to meticulously recreate 25 classic hits just to make them sound identical to the versions people have been listening to for decades? What's the artistic value there?
Well, it is entirely about the business of ownership, and it is one of the most empowering moves an artist can make.
Really?
Oh, yeah. When an artist like Watson spends decades recording for major corporate labels, and he worked with several, including Capitol, MCA, and Epic, the standard contract dictates that the label owns the original master recordings.
Okay.
They control how those songs are licensed, packaged, and monetized.
So he didn't own the very songs that built his legacy.
Correct. The original audio files, so to speak, belong to the corporations. By going into the studio and meticulously re-recording those hits on his own independent label, 14 Karat Music, he generated brand new master recordings. And because he funded them, he owned them. It allows him to license those new versions for movies, commercials, or streaming, and retain the financial control.
Wow.
It's the equivalent of buying back your childhood home. It's a strategic taking back of his own history after 50 years of generating wealth for other people.
That is brilliant. It's not a lack of new creative ideas at all.
Yeah.
It's a profound business maneuver to secure his legacy.
Exactly.
And the creative ideas certainly weren't lacking because he just kept going.
Yeah.
In June 2014, he releases an album called My Heroes Have Always Been Country,
Right.
which is a tribute project covering artists like Merle Haggard, Ray Price, and Lefty Frizzle.
Which serves to contextualize his own sound. He is formally acknowledging the architects of traditional country music who influenced him when he was just a kid singing in Houston.
Then, in February 2016, he drops Real Country Music. This is his 33rd studio album.
Let that sink in. 33 albums.
It's incredible. It features a lead single called Enough for You, penned by the legendary Chris Christopherson. But the achievement that truly defies industry logic happens in 2018.
Oh, this is a great part of the story.
He decides to pivot and expand his repertoire into gospel music, releasing a 13-track CD titled My Gospel Roots.
And what happens with that release?
The first single, a song called Old Roman Soldier, hits #1 on the Cashbox and Christian Servant country gospel charts, in June 2018.
Let's examine the mechanics of that achievement because it is staggering.
Yeah.
His first radio single was in 1962. Hitting #1 on any chart in 2018 means he achieved a chart-topping single 56 years after his debut.
56 years.
How does a vocalist in his mid-70s pull that off?
I mean, it has to require immense vocal discipline. You hear about singers losing their range or their power in their 50s.
It requires discipline, but it also requires a profound connection with an audience that has aged and evolved right alongside him.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Pivoting to gospel is a very natural evolution for an aging traditional country artist. The themes of mortality, faith, and reflection resonate deeply with a fan base that has followed him for half a century. It proves that authentic vocal talent doesn't have an expiration date if you respect the instrument and respect the audience.
It absolutely does. And frankly, with a track record like that, the music industry institutions eventually had no choice but to stand up and give him his flowers. The formal recognition of Watson's lifetime of work in his later years is just as impressive as the chart statistics.
Oh, for sure. The institutional honors really serve as the bookends to his career. In 2002, he was inducted into the Texas Country Music Hall of Fame.
Which is fitting for a guy whose entire sound was forged in the heat of Texas.
And then, deeply connected to his roots, he was inducted into the inaugural class of the Houston Music Hall of Fame in August 2013. That is incredibly poignant. Houston was the city where he spent a decade covered in paint and grease at the auto shop, grinding it out in the local clubs. To be recognized in their inaugural Hall of Fame class brings that struggle full circle.
He also received a highly unusual honor in 2018 at the ROPE Awards. He won Entertainer of the Year, but our sources note that he actually tied for the award with singer Jeannie Seely.
Huh, yes.
And apparently that was the very first time in the history of the ROPE Awards that a tie occurred in any category.
I love that detail because it shows that even deep into his 70s, he wasn't just viewed as a museum piece. He was actively competing as a premier entertainer.
Exactly. He was still out there working, still vibrant.
I also have to highlight the beautiful symmetry regarding his childhood hometown. He was raised in Paris, Texas, and eventually the town decided to name a street after him, Gene Watson Boulevard.
That's amazing. There is something profoundly moving about a kid growing up on those streets and eventually having one bear his name. But of course, in the realm of country music, there is one honor that towers above all the rest, and it finally came to him on January 17th, 2020.
Oh, yes. That was the night Vince Gill invited Gene Watson to officially become a member of the Grand Ole Opry.
If we look at the entire scope of his career, what does that specific invitation represent for an artist like Watson?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the Grand Ole Opry is the unbroken circle. It represents the absolute pinnacle of institutional respect in country music.
Right.
For a traditionalist like Watson, someone who never chased pop crossover money, who stayed fiercely loyal to the waltz, the fiddle, and the steel guitar, who kept a cohesive band together for decades, being invited into the Opry is the ultimate validation.
It's the crown jewel.
It really is. It is the establishment officially declaring your uncompromising approach was right. You are a permanent structural pillar of this genre.
So, bringing this all together, we started this deep dive looking at a young guy in the sweltering heat of 1960s Houston.
Yep.
A guy fixing dents during the day, singing to small local crowds at night, trying to push a regional single without the oxygen of national distribution.
Paying his dues.
And we conclude with a Grand Ole Opry member, a man with his own namesake Boulevard, an artist who re-recorded his own masters to take back his legacy and who topped the gospel charts 56 years into his career. So what does this all mean?
Well, if you've ever wondered how true legacy artists survive the brutal machinery of the music business, Gene Watson is the blueprint. In an industry conditioned to demand instant gratification, his life proves that authentic talent, when paired with an unrelenting blue-collar work ethic, builds something that cannot be washed away by changing trends.
Yeah.
He didn't hack the system. He outworked it, he outlasted it, and he outsang it.
That is the perfect distillation of his journey. And it leaves me with a final lingering thought for you to consider. When you look at the incredibly fast-paced, algorithm-driven music industry we have today, is it structurally possible anymore for an artist to quietly perfect their craft in the shadows for a decade before breaking out?
It's a tough question.
Or is the era of the working-class mechanic slowly turning into a superstar gone forever? Think about that the next time you hear a truly timeless country voice on the radio. We'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.